All right, everybody, we're going to get started. Such a great buzz in the room. Really appreciate you all being here. I'm Ovik Roy. I'm one of the founders of the Freedom Conservatism Project, and welcome to the inaugural Freedom Conservatism Conference. It is amazing to have you all here when you think about all the work that went into just putting this project together, gathering the group of people that we've been able to gather. We never could have anticipated the incredible response to our statement of principles, all the amazing people who've signed on. You know, a century ago, T.S. Eliot observed, if we take the widest and wisest view of a cause, there is no such thing as a lost cause, because there's no such thing as a gained cause. In the 1990s, after the fall of the Berlin Wall and after Bill Clinton pronounced the era of big government over, we who now call ourselves freedom conservatives believed that our cause had been gained. Over the last decade, there's been a boomlet of pundits arguing that the cause of freedom is lost, that it's time for conservatives to give up unlimited government, to instead use the power of the state to, quote, reward our friends and punish our enemies, unquote. Well, those pundits don't seem to know what time it is. There's a lot we don't know about how the next 4 years are going to turn out. But what we do know is that the cause of conserving freedom has been invigorated by new leadership. I'm thinking especially of Elon Musk and his merry band at DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. It's early days yet, and the Dozers will certainly make their share of mistakes, but it is indisputable that the cause of freedom has been energized by their efforts to uproot the unaccountable, unelected bureaucracy that undermines the rule of law, economic freedom, and our democratically elected government. When it comes to new leaders, I'm also thinking of Joe Rogan. It's easy to forget now, but in 2020, Joe Rogan endorsed Bernie Sanders for president. His evolution has been remarkable, and it demonstrates the power and the appeal of freedom. I'm a busy guy. I run a think tank. I don't usually have time to listen to 3-hour podcasts, but I've made the effort recently to listen to a few of Joe Rogan's episodes because he's had a bunch of interesting and important guests. And as many of you probably found if you've listened to Joe Rogan, the thing that comes through when you listen to his interviews is Joe Rogan's passion for equal opportunity and his passion for free speech and freedom of thought. That's a big part of why his podcast has had the reach and the impact and the audience that it does. It has become a place for people to talk about the things that they were thinking about but didn't feel they could express in traditional media venues. Elon Musk and Joe Rogan, in different ways, show us that the cause of conserving freedom will never be lost, despite the best efforts of our competitors, because the yearning for freedom is fundamental to what it means to be human. Nor will the cause of freedom conservatism ever be fully gained, and that's why we need all of you. The work we do here is something bigger than just being about the people in this room, even though the people in this room and our signatories around the country and the incredible array of institutions and grassroots organizations you represent demonstrate the vigor and the strength of our values. Why is the work of freedom conservatism important? It's important because the only reason America is great is because we have conserved a tradition of individual and economic and political freedom. It's the only chance we have to continue to be great as a country. Look at Europe. I was just in London for the ARC conference. I know some of you were there. Did you know that the GDP per capita of the United Kingdom is now lower than that of the poorest state in the United States, Mississippi? Look at China. There are a lot of people among our competitors who believe that we need to imitate China, that we have to become more like China. We have to evolve in ways that imitate their success, quote unquote. I'm not a buyer of that stock. If you look at China today, sophisticated people who actually look at China's economic performance, you know that China is teetering on the brink. Their economy has been incredibly overinflated by government white elephants that have built giant skyscrapers of apartment buildings that are empty, banks that are insolvent that are being propped up by the government, demographic decline. This is the country that we should emulate, a country where nobody has the freedom. Is anyone immigrating to China? Is anyone breaking down borders and walls to come into China? No, they're not. No one wants to move to China. People want to come here. We need to learn from the mistakes of China. We need to learn from the mistakes of Europe, not to imitate them. That's one of the things that freedom conservatism is all about. And freedom conservatism is not only important because it is merely the best, but the only philosophy that has been proven to lift billions of people out of poverty all around the world and help hundreds of millions of Americans achieve their dreams. Raise your hand if you're a signatory to the Freedom Conservatism Statement. Thank you so much for putting your names on our website, on our list, raising your hand and saying this is something you stand for. There was a time not so long ago when people didn't want to stick their necks out, right? And the fact that we have done so has encouraged others to do so. Courage is contagious. Standing up for these principles has made a lot of people realize that that's what I stand for too. That's what's brought people like Joe Rogan along to our side. We invite the rest of you who haven't signed our statement to do so. If you want to, you can go to freedomconservatism.org/about and click on the form there to put your name in. I want to thank our speakers. As you know, we have an incredible program for a one-day conference. The people who have taken time out of their incredibly busy schedules, like George Will and Charles Murray and John Cochran. Can we give them a round of applause, please? We aren't paying anyone an honorarium to be here. People who are here are doing so because they believe in advancing this project and advancing the values that we all believe in. So we're grateful to all of you who've donated your time today to be here. I also want to thank our sponsors, the John William Pope Foundation, the Foundation for Research on Equal Opportunity, the Alliance Defending Freedom, Americans for Prosperity, the American Institute for Economic Research, the JM Foundation, and Ginn Economic Consulting. Without their support, we would not be here today. I want to especially thank the FreeOp staff, particularly Laura Maristani, Tabitha Matthews, and Rebecca Atwood on my team. They have worked so hard to make this event a success. Please give them a round of applause. I also want to thank my colleagues who have helped lead the Freedom Conservatism Project, especially Kent Lassman of the Competitive Enterprise Institute, who's here, over there, I think, somewhere, and John Hood of the Pope Foundation. I'm going to now hand the mic over to John, who has been so instrumental in the success of this project. Nothing that you see before you would have happened if it weren't for John and his team at the Pope Foundation. For those of you who are new to Freedom Conservatism, John is going to give you some background on the project, on who we are, and what we're about. John.
Thank you very much, and ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this inaugural conference of Freedom Conservatism. I am one of the organizers of the project, along with Ovik and Kent, and I'm going to tell you the origin story. Now, I'm not going to tell you the long version of the origin story. It involves gamma radiation, a spider bite, a spacecraft escaping a doomed planet. We just don't have time for that. But I will tell you the short version, which is that Ovik and I were at a meeting together, and it was my idea that we should have a conversation about what should we call ourselves. It was a brand conversation. And Ovik, being a more serious, grounded person, wanted to actually talk about ideas. What is the sharing statement of the 21st century? What should that look like? So he went to my meeting, and I went to his meeting, and the chocolate and the peanut butter got smashed together, and now we have this tasty treat, Freedom Conservatism. Now, I want to explain a little bit more of the project's of principles. These are principles that we seek to defend and indeed to advance. In short, what is freedom conservatism? Well, for starters, it's not just about freedom. Free cons do see liberty as indispensable. We believe American greatness is impossible without American freedom. As a founding principle, as a guide to sound policy, or even a requirement for good marketing, freedom is our touchstone. It's so much who we are, it's part of our name. Okay, aren't there any Wicked fans here? You didn't get the reference, that's okay. Look it up later. Good labels are short labels. Freedom conservatives, free cons. It flags a key value that we share, and it distinguishes us from our rivals. Still, what is necessary need not be sufficient. We seek to conserve freedom, yes, but not only that. We share other values. We seek to conserve them. Indeed, I would submit history shows that individual liberty cannot long be sustained and protected in the absence of other social institutions that inculcate virtue, tame ambition, deter corruption, reward enterprise, foster community, comfort the afflicted, and nourish the soul. I'm in good company. Consider John Locke. We still like John Locke around here. Yes. In his second treatise, John Locke wrote that God bestowed on parents the authority and the responsibility to prepare a child to flourish in a free society for, quote, to turn him loose to an unrestrained liberty before he has reason to guide him, is not allowing him the privilege of his nature to be free, but to thrust him out among brutes and abandon him to a state as wretched and as much beneath that of a man as theirs. So Locke understood the importance of family and other institutions. So did Edmund Burke. We can get a round of applause for Edmund Burke. We're not going to clap for every single philosopher, but Locke and Burke deserve it. So he famously wrote about the little platoons that we do not choose and yet form the germ of public affections. Alexis de Tocqueville wrote about Americans, quote, forever forming associations, and that in a democratic country, knowledge of how to combine is the mother of all other forms of knowledge. On its progress depends that of all the others. Russell Kirk wrote about, quote, custom, convention, and old prescription as checks on the lust for power. Friedrich Hayek wrote that civilization depends on certain traditional and largely moral practices, many of which men tend to dislike, whose significance they usually fail to understand, many of which whose validity they cannot prove. This was Hayek. So what do we affirm? Here's how I put it in a post-election piece for National Review. Freedom conservatives believe in free markets, free trade, free speech, strong families, balanced budgets, peace through strength, and the rule of law. We champion equal protection and equal opportunity. We think Washington has too much power, and our states, communities, private associations, and households have too few powers. NatCons and other nationalist populist voices share some positions with us, and they diverge sharply on other matters, such as trade policy, business subsidies, pluralism, and the devolution of government power. It is our mission to ally with them and anyone else on the things we agree, and to argue with them on the latter, always willing to listen, always hoping to persuade, but always pulling the policy debate in our direction. Now, freedom conservatives aren't identical. Well, actually, my identical twin brother is here, so there is an exception. And throughout the day, we're going to be playing practical jokes on you, and you will not know which of us is tapping you on the shoulder. But generally speaking, freedom conservatives are not identical. We sometimes disagree on matters of priority or of practical application. What binds us together is a set of common principles and a willingness to state them all so people can clearly see them, assess them, and compare them. You'll find all 10 principles at freedomconservatism.org. So let's go through just quickly a thumbnail sketch of each of those items. Free cons, of course, start with liberty. It is indivisible, we state, and political freedom cannot long exist without economic freedom. On our Substack, That's freedomconservatism.org, also an excellent floor wax. At our Substack, we list lots of information, mounds of evidence that freer economies grow faster, freer cultures grow more beautiful, free people grow happier. Speaking of which, we label our second principle the principle of the pursuit of happiness. Quote, most individuals are happiest in loving families and within stable and prosperous communities in which parents are free to engage in meaningful work and to raise and educate their children according to their values. Now that modifier most is a nod to a few exceptional cases, but here we underline the undeniable fact that many social ills lie downstream from the decline of both nuclear families and extended families, as well as the erosion of their influence by government. One of our speakers today, Charles Murray, of course, has made this argument eloquently for decades. There's a vicious cycle here. Welfare weakens the incentive to marry and bear children within marriage. Other entitlements weaken the ties between adults and their elderly parents or their disabled relatives, promising to substitute cash and contractors for truly caring relationships. The resulting alienation and dysfunction breeds more demand for government, thus the cycle. Free cons plan to break that cycle. I'll underline two other ideas here. One is the freedom to work. One might even say the right to work. I'm not so into this notion that some people are arguing that the conservative movement needs to find a way to fall in love with labor unions. I don't think so. The other thing I want to underline is parents educating their children as they see fit. You'll hear a lot about education throughout the day. We call our third principle the foundation of prosperity. According to exit polls, the top voter priority in 2024 was bringing down the cost of living. Free cons pledged to do so with competitive markets, greater individual choice, and free trade with free people while upholding the rule of law, freedom of contract, and freedom of association. You'll also hear more about those themes today. Our fourth principle is entitled Full Faith and Credit. Yes, we know the original constitutional meaning of the phrase has to do with states respecting the laws and judicial proceedings of other states. Our use of the phrase is a play on words. Free cons believe runaway federal spending and the resulting national debt endanger our country. We want to restore America's credit. We also want to restore the public's faith in the budget process and the leaders who follow it so that, quote, future generations inherit a more prosperous and secure nation than the one we now inhabit. And again, you'll hear a lot about that today. Number 5, a nation of laws, not men. This is our rule of law plank, our administrative state plank, our insistence that conservatives appoint and confirm judges who will enforce the separation of powers, checks and balances, and equality before the law. Number 6, Americans by choice. Free cons affirm two propositions. One is that immigration is a principal driver of American prosperity and achievement. The other is that, quote, a sovereign nation has the right to secure its borders and design a rational immigration policy that advances the interests and values of its citizens. We believe these goals are compatible. Another high priority for voters last fall was order on the border. In exit polls, most voters favored stronger enforcement of immigration laws, but they also opposed large-scale deportations. Free cons stand ready to help design a rational, sustainable policy here. Our seventh principle has been confusing Al Gore for decades. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. If y'all don't know how Al Gore mangled that, just look it up later. Our country was born as a union of pre-existing polities. America is not France. Thank you. France has provinces. America has states. We ought not to try to settle disputes by national plebiscite or dictates from Washington. The best way, we wrote, to unify a large and diverse nation is to transfer as many public policy choices as possible to families and communities. Upset by poor policing in Minneapolis, or homeless camps in San Francisco, or genderqueer poetry slams on the streets of Ann Arbor? Well, if you live there, try to change things or change the people who are in charge. Failing that, move from there. If you don't live there, thank your lucky stars and wish your fellow Americans well. Then redirect your focus to issues in your communities where you have some control. Federalism, now let's be clear about this, federalism cuts every which way. Free cons condemn the misuse of federal funds to compel submission by states and localities. We also condemn state and local officials for relying on borrowed federal funds in the first place. Free cons aren't itching to yank the federal strings in a different direction. We're itching to cut them. Number 8, America's promissory note. Here we quote Martin Luther King's famous phrase, and we commit to expanding opportunity for those that face challenges due to segregation and other governmental sins of the past. We affirm equal protection under the law, as well as equal opportunity. There's no inconsistency here. And you'll hear a lot this morning and this afternoon about Free Con's opportunity agenda and the potential it has to build a broader Free Con coalition. Number 9, the shining city on a hill. As one might expect, crafting our foreign policy statement required some frank conversation, some careful wordsmithing, and an earnest search for consensus. Here's what they produced. Quote, American foreign policy must be judged by one criterion above all: its service to the just interests of the United States. Americans are safest and freest in a peaceful world led by the United States, in which other nations uphold individual liberty and the sovereignty of their neighbors. Close quote. Now, there are 2 propositions here. One is that a nation's foreign policy should indeed serve its national interest. Note the adjectives we added, though. American foreign policy should promote just interests. The second proposition is an application of the first, that it is in our interest for America to be a leader, not a hegemon, not a global constabulary, but a leader. An example, a trustworthy partner and ally. An America that, as the 1st Marine Division puts it, is no better friend and no worse enemy. Our 10th principle is freedom of conscience. Essential to a free society, we wrote, is the freedom to say and think what one believes to be true. Governments have a legal obligation to respect the freedom to speak and publish, freedom of religion, and the rights to petition and assembly. We also believe that private institutions, as much as possible, such as private universities, ought to themselves foster a culture of free expression and civil discourse. Now, aren't people who don't call themselves freedom conservatives in favor of many or most of these principles? Of course. I don't just mean self-described conservatives or libertarians or classical liberals. Most Americans believe in free enterprise, lower tax and regulatory burdens, school choice, equal opportunity, free speech, fiscal restraint, and the like, or at least they believe these things in theory. It falls to us to explain how best to put these principles into practice as effective public policy. And when NatCons or other populist, nationalist voices on the right or progressive and populist voices on the left advocate other ideas, protectionism, centralism, fiscal recklessness, or even weirder notions such as rejecting the American founding or integrating church and state, it will be our task to challenge them. You'll hear plenty of examples of that today as well. In 1985, then-President Ronald Reagan gave a speech at the 30th anniversary celebration of National Review, and I know we have some National Review people here. Here's what Reagan said, quote, this is what he said actually in praise of Bill Buckley and his colleagues at NR. He said, you didn't just part the Red Sea, you rolled it back, dried it up, and left exposed for all the world to see the naked desert that is statism. And then, if that weren't enough, you gave the world something different, something in its weariness it desperately needed, the sound of laughter and the sight of the rich green uplands of freedom. We're going to take you on such a tour today. There will be laughter, I suspect, but there will also be strong words and blunt critiques. We'll expose today's policy deserts, and we'll show you glimpses of something better, something sounder, something healthier, a deeper understanding of America's problems, a broader political coalition to address them. a rich, green upland that we call Freedom Conservatism. And let me give you a couple of housekeeping notes before we move to our first panel. First of all, there is a QR code there on your table. You can scan that and go to the SCED app. If you don't have a SCED app, you can add it. And that will just give you information as we go through the day about what's coming up next and the speakers and so forth. So you can find that there. We'll also be projecting that and telling you so you won't get lost. It will keep you on schedule, and we keep ourselves on schedule. Secondly, we're not going to take that many breaks. We will break for lunch. But other than that, we're just going to proceed from speaker and panel to speaker and panel. But by all means, you're welcome to go out and freshen up your coffee or get other refreshments as we go throughout the day. And we promise that we will finish on time. Thank you all very much for coming, and I'll talk to you a little bit more later on.